divide the monomials. Previously, we have talked about how to multiply monomials. A formula we learned 3 formulas. X to the mth times x to the nth equals x to the m plus n, because it means multiplying m copies of x and n copies of x. Together we have m plus n copies of x. Now in this case, first we're going to talk about a formula. What if it's division? So we change that multiplication sign here to division. What will be this equal to? And so we look at example to try to get a formula. If I have x to the 5th divided by x to the 3rd, now when we do division, we are going to, right now we don't have any formula yet, so we're going to go by definition. We know x to the 5th means x times x times x times x 5 times. So we have 5 multiply 5 copies of x. And x to the 3rd means we multiply 3 copies of x. And now we can reduce the common factors from the top and the bottom. As you can see, we can cross out 3 copies of x from both top and the bottom. We are left with these 2 copies of x, and we know x times x is x squared. And let's look at the base. See, x to the 5th divided by x to the 3rd, the base x doesn't change. It's similar to multiplication here, x, x, and we still have x. And for division, it's the same, x, x, we still have the base x, because we're pretty much talking about the number of copies of x, so x doesn't change. But the exponent changes. We had 5 on the top, 3 on the bottom. Now the answer is 2. An easy observation would be 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. And when you think about it, it makes sense because we cross out 3 copies of x from 5 copies of x. So originally we had 5 copies. And then because we cross out 3 of them, so we subtract 3. That gives us 2 copies. So the formula we have is we keep the base and we subtract the exponents. It's top exponent minus the bottom exponent. This is the new formula that we have to memorize today. So now let's look at the example. We're going to mix the variables and numbers together. And let's say we have example 1. Let's see, we have negative 27 n to the 7th divided by 9 n to the 2nd. So to do division, similarly, we can split this into 2 questions. It's pretty much like negative 7 over 9 times n7 over n squared. If you think about the rule for multiplying fractions, that's straight across. And suppose we multiply top and top, that will give us that. And bottom times bottom, that will give us that. So we can reverse the process by splitting it into 2 fractions. So we can divide them separately. But this process, this step can be omitted. If you understand the process, you can go ahead and just do negative 27 divided by 9. That gives us a negative 3. And then we can do n7 divided by n squared. For n7 divided by n squared, we can use the formula we just talked about. Keep the base n, subtract the exponents. 7 minus 2, that gives us 5. So pretty much we're doing 2 problems. Number divided by number give us negative 3. n7th divided by n squared gives us n to the 5th by using the formula. So again, the second step can be omitted if you understand the process. Now let's look at the next example. We're going to just put more variables in there. So we have negative 80 and x to the 3rd, y to the 5th, and z to the 9th, divide by negative, we can do 5 x to the third, y to the third, and z. So again, we're gonna split this problem into 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 division questions, just like doing multiplying 4 fractions. But when we do this, you can skip that step. So first, do negative 80 divided by negative 5. So negative divided by negative will be positive. 80 divided by 5, 5 goes into 8 one time, and 5 goes into 30 6 times. So we get positive 16. X cubed divided by x cubed. Now there are 2 ways to do this. First of all, if you understand x cubed and x cubed are equal, they can be canceled out. So anything divided by itself is going to be equal to 1. But if you say, how about what if I use the formula? What am I going to get? If you use the formula tells us to subtract the exponents. So we do 3 minus 3, that gives us 0. So that seems like we got a different answer, because if you cross them out, you get 1. But if we use the formula, we get x to the 0. So here's something we need to memorize. X to the 0, the second formula definition we need to memorize is x raised to 0 is going to be 1. And notice usually x cannot be 0, because you cannot, if you look at here, x is also on the bottom. X cannot be 0 because anything divided by 0 is undefined. So that's another definition we need to memorize. When we raise a non-zero number to 0, we always get 1. So even if we apply the formula, we're going to get x to the 0, but x to the 0th power is going to be equal to 1. So if we continue to the next step, you're going to get 1. So it seems like the quicker way is, if the top and the bottom, they are exactly the same, you can cross them out without using the formula. But if they're not the same, we will have to use the formula to do it. I mean, not have to, it would be quicker to do it by using the formula instead of doing the slow way like we did here. Expand it and cross out. So we can use the formula 5 minus 3, that's 2. And for the same base z, we keep the base z, and we do 9 minus, not 0, because z means z to the first. We do 9 minus 1, that gives us 8. And by the way, x to the 0, like we said, is equal to 1. So that gives us 16 times 1. 16 times 1 is also 16. And maybe I can write down this step and do one more step. And that gives us 16 times 1 is 16. And y squared z to the 8th, and as the answer.